Okay, so I don't want to keep you waiting. Our first speaker is Aya Kashani, and she is speaking on the cosmic development and individuation process. So I recommend you put your Zoom window on speaker view, and I'm turning it over to Aya. Yay, Aya.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you all for being here today. The PCC ESR Symposium has been offered to us graduates as an opportunity to bring together what we have learned and to share our journey through the program and the ways that we intend to carry its fruits to the next stages of our lives. In preparing for this talk, I found myself struggling with the beginning. Where does my PCC journey begin? I could start in the fall of 2016, when I first came to PCC, and my immersion into the dynamic underlying patterns of reality, the world of archetypes. But then we would miss what came before that, of my time in medical school and my struggle against a system that was no longer nourishing me. So then we could start there in 2013, when I first started medical school. But then we would miss the part before, at the end of undergraduate, when I first discovered non-duality. I was mind blown. I had a series of audio dialogues between the Guru Muji and his followers, and I would listen to them every chance that I had. So we could start there, at the end of my undergraduate degree. But then we would miss my immersion into the sciences, especially biology, with its complex organic processes, playing this evolutionary game, this grand biological system that has been at work for millions of years, slowly perfecting every organism that we see. Life got me, this complex, complicated thing that emerged from nowhere and just grew. So yeah, we could start there. But then again, we would miss out on my time in high school and middle school. I would spend days researching my latest obsessions, lucid dreaming, reincarnation, karma, any new religion that I could get my hands on. So much of my life has its foundations in those years. And yet, if we begin the story there, we miss out on my early years in Iran, where knowledge came not from the world of academia, but that of religion. And we would miss my earliest years still, where knowledge was that of my parents. So maybe we start there, at my birth in the November of 1989, in a hospital in Tehran. My mom's mom had just gotten into a car accident, shattered her forearm. I remember sitting on her lap years later, tracing the scars on her arm from the surgery that was needed to stabilize it. Back in '89, when my mom heard about this accident, she went right into labor, and I was not waiting. So mother and daughter ended up at different hospitals. Those days in Iran, fathers waited outside of the delivery rooms. I'm often told that when I was born and the nurses told him that I was a girl, he was so ecstatic that everyone in the waiting room assumed he had just had a boy. You know, patriarchal goals. So this seems like a good place to start my story. But then, how can I tell my story without telling my father's story, or my mother's, or their parents? In fact, this story that I have been living for the past 30 years doesn't begin with me, my family, or my country. It is a narrative that has been unfolding since before humanity itself became a part of it. It is this transformative narrative and the process through which it unfolds that I intend to draw out for you today and hope to dive into as a PhD student next semester. To best understand the workings of this process and its progression within the universe, let's look at the ancient natural philosophy of alchemy. Some of you may be familiar with the popular saying, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. The implications are clear. Inside, outside, above, and below are one and the same, made of the same things and undergoing the same processes. In this way, what is true for us as human beings is true of the cosmos as a whole, and what is true of the cosmos is true of us as human beings. To better understand the layers that make up this reality, let's explore the well-known alchemical axiom. We begin with 1. 1 becomes 2. 2 becomes 3. And out of the third comes the 1 as the fourth. This 1 then begins the next cycle of 1, 2, 3, and the 1 as the fourth. Through the progression of this process, the fourth step of the last cycle and the first step of the next cycle blend into each other, creating not a series of circles, but a spiral in which each cycle takes place in the one that gave birth to it. And since, as above, so below, this alchemical process can be seen as the basic archetypal pattern that is manifesting in all layers of reality. Let's look at my favorite example. The psychiatrist Stan Grof, through his work with deep states of consciousness, has discovered that the organization of the human memory is based on the emotional charge that it carries, with related experiences organized around a powerful emotional center. As Grof traced these back in time, he found that they stem from 4 main patterns of experience, which he corresponds to the 4 stages of birth. The first stage begins at conception and follows through to the beginning of labor. Here, the fetus's internal experience is one of unity with the womb, which it perceives as the universe itself. With the beginning of labor, the fetus enters the second stage, where the cervix is closed, but the uterus is contracting, resulting in a build-up of pressure. For the first time, the fetus experiences a state of separation and tension. The fetus is no longer one with the universe, but is being actively attacked by it. Once the cervix is open and the contractions continue, the fetus moves into the third stage in the birth canal. This is a life and death struggle for both mother and fetus, with each one inflicting pain onto the other. This death and rebirth struggle is complete in the fourth step, where the fetus comes out of the womb and returns to a new state of unity from the outside. And so, the first step leads into the second leads into the third, and as the fetus emerges from the birth canal, out of the third comes the 1 as the fourth. The fourth being the death of the fetus as an aquatic creature, and the 1 being the birth of the infant as a terrestrial one. Since this axiom is unfolding in all layers of reality, we can say that the fetus grows through this process for 9 months, after which it enters birth, which itself follows this pattern. The infant then enters a lifelong journey of development through large and small repetitions of this cycle on physical, spiritual, and psychological levels. This individual too is nested in the larger and slower process through which the culture grows. Similarly, we can say that the culture is nested in the development of the species in the development of life, life in the development of Earth, and so on, resulting in a cosmic and yet organic being that has been evolving through this pattern of separation and reunion since before the beginning of time. And since it can even be said that this is the process through which the unconscious universe itself comes into consciousness. And so, in the beginning, there was 1. No separation, events, or movements, no time, only pure unconsciousness. From the 1, through the great flaring forth of the Big Bang, came a second, creating the polarities of conscious and unconscious, subject and object, spirit and matter. Within a blink of cosmic time, a third is born from the conflict of these two, containing qualities of both, and yet not fully like either one. With the completion of this third step, a new wholeness is born. And so, out of the third comes the 1 as the fourth. It is this new entity that begins the next cycle and is further transformed. As we have seen, the growth of this cosmic being leads to the creation of the Milky Way, our solar system, Earth, life, psyche, and the conscious ego whose development we participate in. When we look at the development of this consciousness within the larger narrative, as we often do in PCC, we find the tale of the global awakening of the human mind to its place within reality. To no surprise, this awakening of consciousness participates in the same four-step cyclical process of separation and reunion. Following this developmental process within the Western mind, we find that humanity's understanding of itself begins at oneness, unity, and a full participation in a natural world that is filled with mystery and divinity. This is what Rick Tarnas calls the primal mind. In the second phase of its development, we enter the axial mind, where the human being separates from its full participatory state and places the divine mystery into an external God somewhere beyond nature. This mind then moves into the third stage, in which it internalizes the meaning and mystery. And with the coming of the modern mind, the human individual itself becomes the source of the mystery, bringing to completion the death of nature as that source. It is at the end of this modern era that our individual stories begin. With the eventual coming of the fourth step and what Rick calls the postmodern mind, the now individuated human mind moves towards re-enchantment of the natural world and the recognition of divine nature as a living, breathing organism, an organism in which our individual and collective development is taking place, like cells within a body. In so many ways, each of our PCC journeys is an attempt to return of this story to union. As we deconstruct our modern worldviews and once again re-enchant our world, each of us brings our own individual, familial, and collective narratives closer to the postmodern mind. I can clearly see this in my own narrative. I come from a religious family. My father's side has always had a close relationship with preaching. He himself once stood at the crossroads between academia and the mosque. By choosing academia, he moved the narrative that he was unfolding further into the modern, where I was born. My father's move into the modern worldview was further amplified in me as I dove deep into the belly of modern academia, only to use this academic world to return to the spiritual through philosophy, a return to the divine through academia. Within this act, my PCC journey is not only one of the return of my individual or familial narrative to the divine, but that of the cosmic narrative as it has been unfolding through this specific lineage. And of course, every single one of the lives of every person here today carries the same pattern in a different form. As I attempt to locate myself within all of this, I have come to recognize the deeply intertwined nature of my personal and academic work. Whether I'm exploring my own story through contemplation or analysis, or exploring the larger narratives of history, philosophy, or spirituality, I am actively participating in the integration and the articulation of the living narrative that has been evolving throughout history. In this way, none of our PCC journeys ever truly end, as we continue to use these tools to contribute to the further development of this conscious narrative. I came here today to tell you my story. But it turns out that I couldn't tell my story without telling the story of the entire universe. But to tell the story of the entire universe is to tell the story of every individual within it. It is this story that I intend to dedicate the rest of my life to exploring and sharing with anyone who will listen. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Aya, for that beautiful talk. Are there questions for Aya? No one has chatted to me yet, but please feel free to chat because I can't see all of you. So if you have a question, just type your name and then I can ask you to say your question. I suspect the faculty must have questions. Oh, Rick has a question. Great, thanks, Rick. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Aye. That was just so elegant from beginning to end, and I really appreciated the integration of so many of the strands of what constitutes PCC. Stan's work and Brian's work and Sean's, mine, and so forth. And in terms of a question, of course, I actually look forward to next time we're together going into deeper details here and there about, for example, connecting the axial to the second matrix, the axial era to the second matrix in Gross terms. But I have a question for you about our own time, and that is, do you see our own period, you know, which is so complex, this postmodern era of multiple possibilities, which could be catastrophic as well as a wonderful participatory synthesis, as you described. Could you address a little bit more the sense of what is the tension, the balance, our kind of existential challenge right now in terms of, in other words, it doesn't just kind of automatically happen for us. Part of our independence or autonomy is that we're playing a role in something that could go a multiplicity of ways. So I wonder if you could address that.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. So what we're talking about as far as our own time in this context, we're somewhere between BPM 2 and BPM 3. Maybe some people are moving forward a little bit into the actual birthing. And when we're looking at the whole process from two different perspectives, if we're looking at it from the birth itself, from the point of view of the fetus, it's a very terrifying experience. It has a lot of trauma involved with it. There's no certainty for either the mother or the fetus, although times have improved life expectancy during birth. So it is a very much so a, cutting your way out into the world process that's not in any way easy or, but after birth, when you're looking back onto the process and it's like, oh, this was all unnecessary. It's not evil. There's nothing that is being done that is a bad thing. It's a birth pain. It's a birth process. It's not a death process. So in that sense, it really depends on which point of view we're looking from. If we're looking from the first stage, then 2 and 3 really suck and they're not in any way good. But once we get to 4, then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I got this. Now I understand what is happening. So I think for us, it's important to remember that it's both. It is something, it's birth pains, and that can be helpful in keeping us from spiraling to the negativity of everything that's happening. But at the same time, it is a very serious process. Death is an option from birth. It doesn't always result in a life birth. But at the same time, because everything is so nested, even if a fetus dies, the womb is still going to give birth to another fetus, or it's all so universal that something is still surviving and it's moving forward and consciousness is doing its thing, even if human beings end up not participating in that, which we don't like to think about, but.
Well, thank you for deepening the context of what you've described. I'll pass on to whoever else has, but thank you so much, Aya.